Hey, let's get into it. There's a quiet pressure that shows up in community. The pressure to gravitate towards people who seem powerful or influential, people who are successful, people who look like they can open doors for us. And if we're honest, there's a subtle temptation to overlook people who can't offer us anything in return. We've been talking about this over the last few verses here as well, but um, it's something that isn't usually loud or intentional. It just kind of creeps in internally, and we assume, I think naturally, that certain people matter more. They carry more weight. They deserve more attention. James, he knows that tendency was already shaping the early church here, which means that it can shape us too. And so listen to how it kind of comes right at it here in James 2, verses 6 and 7. But you have dishonored the poor man. Are not the rich ones who oppress you? And the ones who drag you into court, are they not the ones who blaspheme the honorable name by which you were called? Um, James is writing, remember, to Jewish Christians, and they're scattered. They've been kicked out of Jerusalem. They're run away, pushed out of their homes. Economically, they're probably pretty vulnerable, and life is probably very unstable. And in that environment, wealth carried enormous social power. There were rich landowners who could control courts, and they could influence like public reputation. They could shape local politics. So then, when somebody wealthy walked into a gathering, the instinct was undeniable: treat them well. Maybe they'll protect us. Maybe they can help. Maybe aligning with them will make our lives just a little bit easier. Um, James sees the irony, though. The very people that they're elevating are often the ones that are actually exploiting them, the ones with power. We're dragging believers into court, using legal systems to pressure the debtors, financial stress, to pressure the workers. On top of that, a lot of these are powerful figures that were probably openly hostile to the message of Jesus, which is why James says here that they blaspheme the honorable name. So while the rich and the powerful looked impressive and they were naturally inclined to maybe favor them, it was those same people who were making their lives more difficult. In the ancient world, to be called by a name meant to belong to someone. It was like identity. Christians carried the name of Christ. Their lives were marked by that name. Their community represented it. And so when the church begins like structuring itself around wealth and status instead of Christ, our identity starts to kind of fracture. And things go a little wonky within the community, within our lives. And so there's a moment in Israel's history that feels kind of strangely similar. When Israel asks for the first time for a king in 1 Samuel 8, they look at the other nations around them and they go, we want a king like that. That leadership looks powerful. We want something like that. They thought that visible strength, a strong, powerful, mighty king would bring them security. But in the end, it pulled them away from God, who had actually been sustaining them all along. And James is warning about that similar drift, the temptation to go after things that look like they'll bring security and power, but will actually pull us away from the actual source that we have of security and power, which is Jesus. And so it was not towards kings, um, but towards influence, towards prestige here, towards people who appear strong. And there's a quiet uh, challenge sitting right here in these verses. Where does our sense of security come from? Is it the proximity of the right people, or the resources that we have, or is it belonging to Jesus? Once we start measuring people by status, we start forgetting the story that brought all of us here. Every person in the room that came in the same way, not by influence, not by power, not by um, sort of bank accounts, but by mercy. So maybe today it's just a moment to pause and notice something. Who do we instinctively pay attention to? Who do we instinctively also overlook? And what might it look like to see people the way that Christ does? Instead of relying on others or the powerful for our security, what if we just looked at everyone equally through the eyes of Christ? Not ranked, not sorted, just equally held by grace. Reflect on those relationships and the way the people around you in your life. And where does our strength and comfort and security come from? Are we looking for it in other sources, whether it's people or things, or do those things actually just want to pull us away from Jesus? So wherever you find yourself, God goes with you today.